Well, if you wanted to be dramatic, you got it.
I have, yeah, well, now I have just, unfortunately, pushed the wrong button. I gotta turn it off. There. Stop.
God, you should die.
Well, gee, and I thought that would be so cool to start with. Welcome to the Changing Times, Changing Worlds show, Otherworldly, and tonight we are going to be talking to GriffinMmagik, who is is going to be one of our speakers this year. She's when we come to the conference very shortly. She'll be doing omens of misfortune, comets, banshees, and ghosts, and also learning how to see auras, which is going to be cool. But tonight she is going to be speaking about things that go bump in the night, because of course everybody likes ghosts and haunted houses and things like that. Do you want people to hold their questions to the end, or do you want to have them raise their hand or come in?
I actually have several breaks built in, so when we cover a section, I'll pause to ask any questions. If there's a burning question you need answered right away, okay, I'll try and answer it if I see your hand up or something, but there is built-in places so we can stop and answer some questions. Tonight we're kind of like
jam. Chat room. I'll keep an eye on the chat so that you can, so you don't have to watch the chat room while you speak. So, okay. Take it away, GriffinMmagik. Oh, I didn't introduce yourself because I forgot to introduce you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Some of you people know me as GriffinMmagik. Other people know you as Genevieve or Michelle. So I walk many paths. I'm in the SCA, and I've been around for a while doing this sort of things. And my background basically is an approach, a combination of science and psychology. So that's kind of like my razor's edge to anything that's strange out there. It could be strange dealing with the cat next door or things that go bump in the night. So that's a little bit about me. If you could set it up so I can share my screen. We have a presentation here, getting all fancy. Okay. Shift this up a little bit.
It worked. Okay, good.
Okay, and I'm going to open this up a little bit more. So can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Okay. So basically, I like to call this what goes bump in the night, or is that the pipes, the neighbors, cats again. Learning how to evaluate environmental energies around us. This is set up for someone who has actually practiced magic for a while, and it's learning how to do different things. So welcome, and this is presented in support of Changing Times. You got the date. What I'd like you guys to do, if you can for a minute, if you've got access to a candle and matches, just light it. Light a candle. The reason why you light a candle is basically sometimes with this type of discussion, your inner fears will call things in. Sometimes talking about this, things will wander around, say, hey, there's something interesting going on. So lighting a candle is a way of protection. It's also a way of calming your inner child. So is everybody able to light a candle? Okay, you've got cat in your arm, Jenny.
Yeah, I can't light a candle either, but saying a prayer is acceptable. And I have lots of prayers and meditations that I can bring to the game. And oh, by the way, Jenny is also Genevieve in the SCA.
Yeah, but I'm not using Genevieve anymore. I'm using Feather Stitch as my
Oh, okay.
crafty name.
Okay.
Right. And one of these days I need to change my name to Griffin Brook so it shows up that way on the screen.
Let's let the program continue.
Okay. So Reason why, basically this type of topic can let you slip into fear and panic as you go through this. So the first thing we need to think about is our brains. I know it sounds strange when you're talking about things that go bump in the night, but you need to understand how you react to fear. Some people will be able to manage to muster through fear. Some people will absolutely panic. It's your child mind that actually has that panic. It's like, I'm afraid of spiders. So my first instinct when I see a spider is run away. But it's your ego, which is your adult mind, that actually says, hey, maybe that's not a spider. Maybe it was something else. And it's your super ego that basically says, okay, send that other part in to check it out. Is it a dust bunny or something else? And how do you deal with it? So knowing how to react to fear is very important for all of life, but especially for magical practices or understanding what's going on in a ritual or if you're investigating energies. So if I go too fast, let me know. I've got tons of information I'm trying to pack in here. So when you think about sensing energies, there's lots of people who say, oh, I don't sense anything out there. Or, you know, oh, I'm sensitive to everything. I kind of think of your magical abilities kind of like allergies. Some people have no allergies and they go through life positively happy and fine. And some people are so sensitive, they need to develop techniques to deal with it. So magic and perception is very much like that. So this is very, very important. I have a twisted sense of humor, as some of you know. So magical hygiene tips. Before you dive into any sort of magical practice, you really need to know who you are. You need to think about, where am I at in life? How am I feeling? What's going on in my family? If you're having a lot of things going on, you're not able to focus properly to what's at hand. Are you physically, mentally, and spiritually ready for whatever you want to partake in? If it's a ritual, if it's a healing practice, if it's a meditation, these are the sort of things you need to think about. Most importantly, as you go through this whole list, you need to think about in the end, is this safe for me right now? Like trying to help somebody in the middle of a migraine is not necessarily helping them. So, okay. So any questions at this point?
Nope.
Nope, okay.
Nope, not here.
Okay, so the next step is investigations. So these are some of the topics we'll be covering. Personal protections, you need to think about individually what your protections are. One of the best ways to practice your protections and your ability to sense things is practicing on your home and your safe space first. You may find something out about your home that you didn't realize. You may have an energy leak. You may have a dusty corner that you haven't thought about. You know, the important thing is practice on yourself first and in your space before you go to volunteer to help others. Because if you can't take care of yourself first, you can't really help others. You also go into some general assumptions, research, and discernment after this. Okay. You see all those ghost hunting shows, they go, knock, knock, who's there? Anybody here? It's kind of like an invitation to the entire block. You do not want the whole block to show up. You know, if you're looking for great Aunt Sadie and you think she's knocking on your door, you say, is that great Aunt Sadie or someone that I know in this immediate space, in this place and time? Otherwise, these energies can wander depending on what they are. Excuse me. I'm not going to go through the whole ghost hunter's litany, but here are some of the basics you need to think about. Before you jump to the assumption that it's a ghost or there's something else going on, you need to check out all the physical possibilities. You need to see, you know, is it the pipes? Do you have a fear grid going on? Fear grids are when you have old copper pipes and electrical things. Back in the day, they used to ground to those pipes. So that can make you twitchy. Is that person living by a large power grid or those high tension lines? They have found that people living in those areas actually have developed either sensitivity or the children have had problems. So the electrical magnetic fields do affect what's going on. You also need to think, what's going on in the house? What's happening there? How long has it been going on? What do they think that's happening, especially if you're working with someone else who says, oh, there's ghosts going on. So you need to know what their religious background is. They may be ultra religious, or, they may be rebelling against something. These are all sorts of things you need to think about. And as strange as it sounds, you hear the history of the house is important, but it's also important to look at the geological topography. The reason why is they have found that certain crystals and certain types of metals can actually hold on to energy, and they can play things back and create different types of environments. So a lot of people don't think about the geology or the topography. With all the construction we've been doing in the last century or so, things have shifted around. We've had creeks and rivers, which used to be on top of the ground, get shunted underground. That changes the entire environment. Okay, so the next 2 pages are some basic ideas of things you should and shouldn't do. You should be willing to set your own boundaries and know when to ask for help. So that means if someone says, oh, we're seeing things flying around, we're going on, if it's a situation you don't think that would be good for you or safe for you to go into, then don't do it. Do ground and center yourself before and after any investigation. You want to make sure that you've not collected any energies that you should not be bringing home. You do want to use your own personal protection ritual, whichever one works for you. Some people still stick with the Christian method. Some people will invoke their gods and goddess. Other will invoke the spiritual light. The important thing is what is important for you and what is protective now. Do you listen to your gut instincts? It feels like there's something strange. Think about it and decide what's the best point of action. Do you prepare to take immediate action against potentially harmful spirits? Basically, if you feel that it's wrong and it's dangerous, get the heck out of there. You don't need to take any chances. So don't take your safety for granted. There's been so many problems where people will panic. Again, that's that child mind going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I didn't know what to do. I got touched by a ghost, freaking out, and then tripping and falling down the stairs. So these are some of the common things. Don't go ghost hunting alone. It's easier to get frightened by yourself than you have a ghost hunting buddy or someone helping you. It's also a good way of checking and checks and balances. You go, okay, did you see or hear what I think you hear? Let's write it down on a piece of paper and compare notes. If you're overly tired, feeling stressed or angry, all these sort of things, one, open yourself up to things that you don't want to be dealing with or you shouldn't be dealing with. Okay. So I love this picture. Assumptions. Everybody assumes if it's unknown, it's automatically evil. That's not necessarily true. A lot of times, oh, it's a demon, it's a darkness, it's going to get me. That's not always the case. Okay, so we're up for our first ghost story. It's a case of assumptions. In New York City, in Brooklyn, there was this family. They wound up moving into a brownstone. They were Hispanic, and as part of the Hispanic culture, they tend to bring all their crosses and their iconography and their their Jesus statues and all sorts of things. They put them all up. So they did some repair work on the house. They moved in. The first couple of weeks, it was fine. Then they started hearing these noises and the statues start falling off the walls and the crosses start falling down. It seemed to get worse on Friday nights. So they put up with it for a little while and they proceeded to start praying more. They figured, okay, maybe there's something here. Let's just pray more. It'll get rid of it. It got worse. They called the priest in. The priest said, yes, we'll do a blessing on the house. The priest did the blessing on the house. And he said, that should do it. It was okay for about a week. And then it started acting up. Again, more things were being knocked off. Friday, one of the Friday nights, there was this mist that appeared in the middle of the dining room. They couldn't figure out what it was, but it scared the heck out of them. So they looked up the local ghost hunting group. They brought someone in who did research on the property. its history, and they brought in a medium. Through their research, they found out that this particular house had been a multi-generational ascetic family's home, that the father had been ultra-Orthodox, was very, very, very strict on Shabbos and Friday, and he was very upset with the complete changeover of everything. So they came up with an agreement. The family would take down some of the icons and some of the religious things. They would put up a mezuzah, and they would have the rabbi came in and did the Kaddish for the dead. And then things were a whole lot better. They had learned to live together, which is one of the cool things I like, because you can't always assume something is evil or wrong. It's just from a different culture. Okay. Spirit energies come in all different types. I thought I took the animation out. Sorry about that, guys. This is the list of spirit energies that are out there, and it's not a complete list. How we interact with them, what they look like, how they feel. For some people, they get a taste, a touch, a feeling, all things will change depending on time. So that's a pretty long list, and that doesn't hit all the cultures. So depending on what you believe in will shape what you think. Now, all cultures have spirits and ghosts, and they see them in different ways. They perceive them in different interactions and different ways of handling them. Okay, sometimes the way you perceive it, okay, like Chinese are really into doing weird, bizarre stuff like this. Okay, they will have different ways they present themselves. It doesn't necessarily mean it's evil. It's just the way that culture sees it. Many ghosts of different cultures are associated to elements. So it's not uncommon when you see a typical depiction of a ghost, even if they've never been near water, because they are sorrowful, they will rise out of water and leave water stains around. By looking at the culture and the history, you can understand what type of energies you're going to be working with. Because the United States is very much of a mixed bag, we've got everything going on here. So you need to look at that and understand that these different spirits are shaped not only by the culture, but also the beliefs of the different people going through those areas. Okay. This is a Japanese kitsune, which is a crossroads demon. Okay, in traditional Japanese lore, she's not horrible. She's not one of those crossroads demons you get in more European mythologies. She's more of a trickster in the Native American alignment. People also forget animals are considered non-human ghosts, and so are angels and guides. Okay, elements too will take their shape according to the country that they're in and the way that they're perceived. Okay. Now, dealing with elementals, they are shaped not only by their environment, being earth, air, water, and fire, they are also shaped by the peoples they live near. So if you think, if it was possible to have an island all by itself and no one ever lived, okay, your elemental would have its unique shape. The first groups of people that come to that space will have their own imagery that they will put upon that. So we'll say some Native American people came by, and then the elementals wound up taking that shape of the Native American. You bring in, okay, the colonization where you have massive trauma and tragedy and death. And that will make the elementals, some of them very angry. And that changes the way that they interact with the environment. Then you add on the next layer, okay, which is your viewer's expectations. The viewer's expectations, I'm going to see an elemental, it's going to look like this. The reason why I say this is in the United States, we will see a lot of your elementals that have a Native American type of look, but it looks different when you go to Mongolia or to China because it's that shaped culture that goes with it. You also run into things like in, I think it's in Ireland with Leith Castle, which has had a historic elemental there since the castle was built. And again, that's an atypical case of the land interacting with the people that were there. They had some incidents, they had a lot of death, a lot of tragedy, but then people came kind of sightseers, go, we're going to check this out. They put their energies on it. So what happens is what may start off as a basic elemental has changed its shape by the people. Then on top of it, you've got the tragedy and trauma, which changes the shape. It's still at its core an elemental, but it's developed this whole next level. And lastly, with the viewer's expectations of seeing this evil creature, it almost creates a prototype of an egregore being an energetic being that is completely on its own and can do a lot of things and collect the energy and interact a little bit more. So it's very difficult to separate these items out. So starting off at the basic and moving on this way up, it's hard. If you're lucky enough to run into an elemental that hasn't been shaped, it's actually interesting because they like to shift depending what the element is. Okay, do we have any questions at this point? I know I'm going pretty quickly, but there's tons of information here.
If you have a question, unmute yourself and ask.
Okay. Okay, this is really important. It's called discernment. I have the original, I grew up Roman Catholic, so that's why I have in the actual quote for it. It's describing the ability to discern and interpret and the difference between the spirits and the energies, to discern between good and evil. It's also, as magical people, we need to develop the skill. It's not something where go bam, you suddenly got discernment and you can identify all these spirits. They're good, they're bad, or they're ugly. This is a skill you need to learn to practice. And it's very important if we're working with healing energies, if we're working with a spirit guide, anything, magical practice. Again, it's a gift. Not everyone gets the same amount of it. Basically, discernment is a resonance with your higher self. If you think about it, you've got those gut feelings in your chest going, okay, this feels right or this feels wrong. Listening to those, thinking about it. It's your soul vibrating with your higher self. It's kind of like bouncing back and forth. Is this good? Is this bad? Am I seeing what I'm supposed to be seeing? Especially when you're encountering something that you're not sure. So you have to think of, is this a safe thing? Is it a good thing? You need to go step forth and think about what you're perceiving and how you're perceiving it. Because different people will perceive things in different levels. Some of them will see it like there's this cup solidly here. Other people will reach out and sense it with their hands. Other people will perceive these things in a dream state. So as magical people, there's so many different ways we can learn to see. So some of the things you need to think about when you ask the question, who's there? Are there any spirits here and now? No open invitations on the block. It's not a block party because you wind up creating problems for yourself if you do that. So how do you search for energies in your home? So if you sense a presence, what does it feel like? You need to think about these questions. What sense do you get an impression of? Are the voices in your head your voices? Or are you getting an audible from, some people are clairaudient, so they can pick these different things up. So again, you need to listen to what's going on. So human and family spirits in your house, usually you can get an impression of if someone's coming in to visit or not. If it's a family spirit, you still need to test them. That's where the discernment comes back in. You can't automatically assume that if it's your great Aunt Sadie, she's coming to visit. Well, she was the great Aunt Sadie the before. Is it the same spirit acting? Because we have no way of testing the physicality of it. What we need to do is like ask a question. So if you ask Aunt Sadie, what's my favorite color? My favorite color is actually purple, but I think the color orange. If they come up with the color orange, I know it's not who they claim to be. It may be a simplistic way of saying it, but you need to test them. In Native American, they test the spirits as well. You have to see 3 sides and it has to be clear. And you still have to question what they tell you. Usually human and family spirits come back for a brief time to give you a message, let you know. Sometimes, a lot of times, family spirits will come in your dreamscapes because it's easier for them to reach through and just pop in and say, hi, here I am. Like right now with Samhain, you know, a lot of people are dreaming more about their past relatives. Okay, hungry spirits. I use the Japanese term of hungry spirits. They're lost spirits. They are what you would call spirits that weren't able to complete what their mission was on life. And because they're angry, they are jealous of you being alive. In Chinese and Japanese cultures, a lot of times these hungry spirits are stuck at the crossroads. They will leave out gifts of food, offerings to basically try and bait them so that they can go back to where they need. You do not expect to see it here in the States, but I actually, in my area about 2 weeks ago, I saw an offering at a crossroad. They set up a little Buddhist shrine and they set out things. I'm going, okay, I didn't know we had that here. So it's all over the United States. In Native American cultures, depending on the tribe, depending on the location, sometimes they will put out bells and feather and bless smoke, okay, to keep the hungry spirits away. Not any particular culture has a way of moving these spirits on. It's again, an individual basis. Fragmented revenants. They're a bit harder to deal with because it's one of those things, actually with a lot of these things, if you haven't had an interaction with them, you don't know how to identify the energies until someone is, hey, did you know that was a hungry spirit? That's what it feels like, you know, and that's how you share. It's like, oh, okay, I now have ID'd this type of feeling. So that's what's going on. In a cemetery over by where my dad was buried, they wound up tearing up a huge chunk of the cemetery. And we didn't know what was going on. It just felt like bits and pieces of angriness all over the place. You couldn't say it was this or that. It was just, they were angry. The cemetery went back to the 1700s and they didn't know what was going on. And the energy mass was kind of like this weird thickness of just ickiness and angry. And it took me a while. I actually went over there and sat down. It's like, okay, what's going on? Because I figured, okay, if it's spirit or whatever, let me see what I can do to help. And there wasn't anything I can do for this group. They actually wound up being dispersed by a very intense lightning storm that actually struck the ground 3 times and actually broke some of the fencing. It was an old-fashioned stone fence. And after that, a couple weeks later, they actually put up a marker for all the people who had been buried there. They actually put it onto a massive wall as commemoration. So after that, it was fine. Sometimes fragmented revenants won't have that type of energy. They just want something, one in particular. I was wandering past another cemetery. I was doing, I think it was an Ecumenicon or Esotericon or one of those. Sometimes you just get burned out by going to too many events and trainings. And it was on a Friday night and I was wandering by. It sounded like noise. I'm going, okay, what's going on? And here, it was a Jewish cemetery. They just wanted someone to say Shabbos. It's like, I have friends who are Jewish. I can't help you. You know, so it's like I can do Baruch Atah Adonai, and that's about all I know. And it seemed to, you know, suffice for them. It's that the one, they wanted to be recognized and that they had missed things. Now let's see, we have covered elementals. So those can change shape again over time and the place and location. I've dealt with a couple of them in one of my previous homes. It wound up being basically a water elemental who had all those different levels put on through pain and tragedy and everything else. And it wound up taking someone who knew Appalachian root magic to pull off the negative stuff and get rid of it. So the elemental could go back to being its plain old water elemental. But unless you can identify what it is, it's very hard to know what the proper steps. Now, other non-human types of creatures include the ghosts of your cats, your dogs, angels, and spirit guides. You still need to question them. They have also the non-human, as in they've never lived, but they're angry. Sometimes they're just simply negative energy and hurtful. It's like, for those, you need to pass on to someone who has a lot more experience in identifying them and what they can do or can't do. So do we have any questions at this point?
You mentioned no open invitations. Do you have an opinion on everybody's favorite, the Ouija board?
Okay, the Ouija board. For some people, it's an open invitation. I actually have a friend who loves to collect haunted ones. I personally prefer not to use them, but when I was first learning my skill set and what I could and couldn't do, I basically figured out that if I set down a set of questions, okay, so I can limit my time, light my candle, okay, and basically ask for prayer of guidance and protection the same way you would if you were looking into a magic mirror or scrying. Okay, I had a little bit more protection. The important thing is, at the end of your session, I made sure that I asked anything that may have been attracted by my presence, return and harm none. So, but for some people, Ouija boards are a problem. Either they're too sensitive or that they invite things in they're not ready to deal with. What's your opinion on them?
Go, Sean.
I tend to see them as they're like opening a window or like an old-fashioned party line. You never know what's on the other end.
Mm-hmm.
I like the party line analogy best of all.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just old enough to
Because
remember those.
I remember them too, because, you know, we played with them, and because of the nature of my mind and spirit, I never really got anywhere with it. But there was this sense that it's like driving a car with no brakes.
Yeah.
So it'll go as fast as you want, but you can't stop. But I also had a question too, which I was going to ask after the first round, but I was being distracted and didn't push the button in time.
That's
We
okay.
were talking about negative elementals, which I'm assuming means an elemental that has been exposed to negative energies, because my interpretation of elementals as a group is that they are essentially neutral.
Correct.
I mean, water is water, dirt is dirt, air is air. Now, suppose you have a sympathetic attitude towards anything that's having a bad day. Is there anything you can do to help an elemental that has been, well, I'm going to use the word contaminated?
It depends on the level of contamination. So like in my new place, I just recently relocated. The previous owners claimed to be gardeners, but they didn't respect the land. So,
Ooh.
yeah. So I literally sat down and talked to the earth, and I said, hi, it's like, I'm not like the previous person. Please work with me. You know, I want to welcome the land and the space back into a better balance, you know, and I went to my tree and I talked to the tree and I said, you work between earth and sky. It's like, can you help me do this? And the interesting thing is that My neighbors swore they have never seen in this space. The deer have come up. Granted, they've been munching in my garden, but they have seen more wildlife frolicking in my yard and more bees and other things. So by sitting down and having a conversation, even if you don't think you can hear, because the way they speak is at a different tone and a different speed than we do, but their
Yes.
intent is different. The intent is what makes all the difference.
So if you broadcast a positive vibe toward them, saying, yes, I see you, I know who you are, I want you to be well.
Mhm.
And it was just like, weeks ago, I think it was Starwolf was talking about bags of quartz points that had been harvested in a rather brutal fashion.
Mhm.
And he talked about kind of being with the quartz points and, talking to them, And my comment was, yeah, you're telling them that they're safe now.
Mhm.
And I think if we broadcast that kind of wavelength to the immediate world around us, and we can do it to, elementals or whatever, that they will respond to it.
That's true, but you also need to follow up with the physical action as well. So if
Mhm.
I just said I'm going to try and make the land better and then did nothing, that's
Right,
basically-
yeah, if the land has been despoiled, you have to restore it.
So like
Yeah.
I brought in topsoil and then I had blessings
Mhm.
on the soil and rededicated the space. And
Bill's
it's gonna
my
take a
husband,
while.
Bill's my husband, by the way.
Oh.
We, existing as renters, we seldom have the rights to do anything constructive. We might
Mhm.
be able to do something like surreptitiously burying a crystal in a corner of the lawn or something.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
but I still have a broader view of it in terms that my entire life at one level has been dedicated to ministry to the sick and dying. And I see elementals that are damaged this way as sick.
Mhm.
They've been hurt. And that's why I responded to Starwolf's comment about the quartz points in that way, because they were sick, they were hurt. And hearing, it's like, I've had dreams where I was a little boy and something had gone terribly wrong. And all I wanted in the entire universe was somebody to tell me that it was going to be okay. And I remember in one dream, I had dropped something valuable and broken it. And this entity, whether it's my guardian angel or an older version of myself or whatever, came by and said, it's going to be all right. Let's pick up the pieces first. And that really kind of has driven me for quite a few years. So I wanted to kind of wrap that around what you've been talking about, because I always have this viewpoint, because the whole world is so wounded that, you only have to walk out on your front porch to find something that needs fixing.
Mhm.
So, and that's why I wanted to ask that question about the elementals.
I believe in the in the puddle effect. As one individual, I can't change the world, but I can work in making my little space a little better place. And
Well, yeah, the idea that today, this little corner of the world will be a little better.
and
And
if
that's
I
all
can
any
teach
of
the
us.
children, sorry, if I can teach
Yeah.
the children around me to be respectful or be aware of what's going on, they may not necessarily need to know it's magical woo-woo, because sometimes they'll panic. But if you teach them to respect the land and be more thoughtful about what they're doing, that too is an impact.
Right. And I always think of it in terms of this is what is right to do.
How much have you got left, Magic?
I'm sorry. Let's see. Yep, that's it.
Are
Up to resources.
Okay.
All right, let's
good.
chug on then.
Then we continue. Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't watching the time. I was trying to
that's my job.
Okay.
So
So I have a list of resources that are helpful, and they're different viewpoints.
Okay.
And here's some of the resources that I have used in researching things. When I gave this workshop last time, it was actually a 4-hour class. So I'm trying to squish everything down and touch the key points. And additional things that are also very, very helpful. Google Scholar is an amazing resource, but the one I use all the time is academia. I work for a university, and some of the research that's out there on religion, dying, like depth psychology is really amazing these days because it's blending, what we would call magic with understanding the world around us to reinterpreting the energies and making a difference in the world around us.
Yeah, and as a hospice trained homemade, it has so evolved from when Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote her first book. And it's something everybody has to be aware of.
Yeah. And as magical people, we deal with these energies on a daily basis in unexpected places. I mean, my father was dying of cancer, and I was there with chemo, and I could see him getting twitchy. And I knew he was upset. He sensed there was a change in the environment. Here, the ghosts of his buddies from World War II were coming to try and support him, but he would just sense the uneasiness. So I just closed my eyes, said, okay, guys, it's like, I know you're here, but he doesn't need this right now. He's not ready to go yet. So if you can back off a little bit, and they were cool about it.
So they were ready for him. They were ready for him when he was ready for them.
When it was time, yeah. I was there when he passed. So it was like, it made him uncomfortable because they were a little early. They were trying to provide comfort. But you could run into these ghosts and energies in all different sorts of ways. And one of the other conventions I went to, I was really tired. I usually set wards up, temporary wards in my my hotel room, so I'm not bothered when I sleep. I forgot to do it that night. And I got the impression of all these little kids jumping up and down on my bed, and they were so happy I could see me. And it's like, okay, look, I'm really tired. Just, I'll help you later. Just let me get some rest. The next morning, it was funny because there was a lot of women going, did you hear all those kids running up and down the steps and just making all that noise all that night? They kept me out. There was no ghost. There was no kids in the hotel at all. When I went for a walk later, it's like, okay, guys, I'm here. Tell me where you want me to go. So I went for a walk. I went to a different cemetery, and I went to where they were at, and I started looking around, and I was completely surrounded by little kids' headstones. And I started looking at the dates, and the dates are about the time of the cholera pandemics.
Oh.
And I said, okay, guys, do you want to move on, or let me know what you want? It's like, no, we were just happy that somebody noticed us.
yeah.
You wanted something to play with?
It's like, I gotta sleep now. Any other questions that I can help you guys with or assist you with?
Well, I think I'm good. I usually have like 47 questions, but
I've got a thing that I've been a little bit nervous since my sister is dealing with medical problems, and she mentioned that dad and mom who have passed are frequently at her house, several days a week, and I was like, well, holy Moses, she's both sick of all the BS of life, and my parents are there. This is not, I tend to think people coming to visit when they are ready to help you move to a new location, as it were. And
well, that's
under new management.
Yeah. Okay, so
but
first
not
off,
necessarily.
if you have an image, or you feel that it's your mom or your dad, if you test them and you think they are, sometimes higher spirits, like what we would call angels, okay, or sometimes they're to add comfort, and they will take on the guise of someone that you would trust. to give a message. Now, in my experience, I've actually had interactions with family members who have passed for other reasons. One of them woke me up because his wife had been out of surgery, and the way he woke me up was by literally, you know, that it's a response where you take a nail and you have someone run it up on your foot. There's some sort of traction. Yeah. Okay. I was dead asleep and I felt this. I'm going, well, maybe it's a bug. Maybe it's something else. And I asked on the third time to do it, and they said, fine. And I ran downstairs, and my girlfriend is into ghost hunting. She pulled up her little tape recorder, and the message that came across, we heard the whisper of call. And here we found out when I called the hospital, my aunt had just woken up from surgery and she was wondering where I was at.
Oh, okay.
You know, so sometimes they come back for that. Sometimes they just come back to check out and see how you're doing. Most times, you know, they've moved on to do whatever they need to do. But it's always good to know that family's around, especially if you had a good relationship with them. If you didn't have a good relationship, they're banned.
I'm suddenly reminded, for whatever reason, my father died just sort of his 75th birthday, and he had lived a pretty miserable life after having a back injury in a German prison camp in World War II. And I knew he was failing. And then one night, I was sitting at my computer in my room on the second floor of where you live now, Chipicon. And I suddenly sat up in my chair because I realized a noise that I had never noticed had suddenly stopped. And I found out later that that's when Dad died. And I had been picking up his pain the whole time without realizing it.
That's an important thing to know, to make sure you're not taking on those things, because sometimes if you're picking up on the pain, you're also picking up on some of the energetic elements of the disease, whatever's happening.
Well, at that time, I had no clue about any of this stuff, but I was very close to my father. We were born on the same month and day. I grew up to be the same height, the same weight, same hair color, same eye color, and physiologically, an identical twin born 32 years later to another mother.
Okay.
And so there's a bond there that goes way beyond what a lot of people experience with their fathers. So I'm not surprised that, you know, I didn't even think about it. I know he's sick. He's going to die soon. And then suddenly, like I said, this noise stopped. And I realized, oh, he's gone. I think about him a lot.
I understand. I think about my dad a lot. Both my dad and actually pretty much all my immediate family has passed. But my dad was an electrician, and about a week after he passed, because he did the wiring in my house, it's like things started getting funky, like the doorbell which was disconnected, started going off, or the light switch that he installed started flipping on and off. It's like, okay, Dad, I need to get some work. The same thing happened when my brother passed, because he helped my dad. So, you know, you consider these little blessings and messages.
Yeah, I think about some of these spirits that are alternatively helpful and a colossal pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the cold lad of Hilton for one, and that was a weird story. But yeah, the idea that they're trying to be helpful, but they seem to have lost a clue or two in the passing process.
Yeah, well, some people think when they pass, they suddenly become these wonderful spirits. It's like, no, if you're a pain in the butt in this life, there's a good chance you'll be a pain in the butt in the afterlife.
Yeah, you're just a spiritual version of everything you ever were.
And I mean, personally, it's like if I could razz somebody just to mess with them because they can't see me, you know, it's like, hey, that'd be cool. And it's not limited to just human spirits. I had a cat, her name was Griffin, and she was a wonderful circle cat. And unfortunately, she didn't like my fiance at the time. She would tease him like he'd be asleep, and she'd mess with his hair. She'd sleep between us, extend her claws out into his back, and a whole bunch of other things. Well, we broke up, and then years later, she wound up dying suddenly. I get a phone call from my ex, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 or 4 years. And he said, I have a silly question. It's like, is Griffin all right? And I said, well, no, she just passed a couple hours ago. And I asked him why. And he's like, well, I was sleeping and I felt this weight on my chest and I felt these claws sink in, and he didn't have cats at the time. And he opened up his eyes and he saw these green eyes because she was a green-eyed cat. So I guess she wanted the last laugh. So how are we doing on time and questions?
And I see about 8 minutes to 9.
Okay, so that gives us 8 minutes for any other questions that I can help with.
Chipicon, you're muted.
Thank you. I was just saying we're good on time, but yeah, I was going to comment when we're talking about the haunted Ouija boards.
Mhm.
I have found that Ouija boards reach other planes, and if you've got your open, as you were saying, your block party, if you're going to anybody, I imagine them like, do you remember public phone booths?
Yes.
And occasionally the phone would ring, and we used to pass around in high school the numbers for phone booths in San Francisco or whatever. And if you're using a Ouija board and saying who's there, it's not unlike calling a public phone booth somewhere you don't know where it is, and who's going to be hanging around the street and answering random phone calls. It's not going to be anybody who's got anything to do.
Right.
It's going to be the young punks who got nothing else to do, which is why when you have so many teenage girls and preteens and sleepovers, the answers they will give, they'll reach into their subconscious and they will find out who the most disliked kid, who am I going to marry? And they'll find the name of that kid, and just to freak them out, because they have nothing better to do. If they had something to do, they'd be doing it.
True.
And then of course you've got the whole perception added onto it from the Exorcist book and movie. There wasn't a problem with spirit boards before that book and movie, and
True.
suddenly they're big, spooky, dangerous things. Yes, they are an open avenue. They are a circuit to reach another plane, where you're probably going to find some juvenile delinquents.
I hope that,
Bad
well,
and
I
indifferent.
personally hope that plane crashes.
Yeah, the only thing about a Ouija board is that it opens you up as a medium. And the thing is, there's a little relinquish of self-control. If you're a psychic, you are developing your skills to talk directly to spirits. You have your own intuition. You're keeping the spirit at bay, and you're communicating with them directly.
At arm's length.
Yeah, at
But
arm's
at
length.
arm's length.
Whereas a Ouija board, you're already open yourself up as a medium or a conduit. This is where I have a problem. This is where I teach people, don't do that type of thing, because I want them to have psychic control over the conversations they have, because that's the important part. Is if you're conscious control, you're also asking the questions. I like very much what Griffin you're saying about, having the questions, working the spirit, verify that it is there. I also like the fact that you mentioned that family spirits, they generally come within 2 weeks, give or take. I find that is true, and there's other cultural provenance for that type of thing. But beyond that, there's spirit components going elsewhere.
Mhm.
A lot of critters will mimic that because you're projecting it. You're projecting that image and feeling of that being. And I like the technique. You give them a red herring to follow, like projecting orange instead of purple. That is a great technique. I love that.
Thank you.
But it's
So-
interesting because it suddenly sounds like we're talking about the difference between calling something to you and throwing yourself out for things to come to you.
Yeah, that is a big
Because
difference. Big difference.
Because there's a lot more control in saying, you over there, we need to talk, as opposed to, hi, I'm here.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh,
So I said, don't invite the block.
There's a great question in the chat. What does one do when they have a displaced house spirit?
Oh,
Specifically,
yeah.
my new house seems to have a female Mazamuelo, and she doesn't seem that happy. At least I think it's a Mazamuelo. She does look like the pictures of them from Italian folklore.
Not familiar with that spirit, but
House spirits. House spirits can be displaced. Sometimes they attach the family. Sometimes they attach the location.
right.
So
My guess would be meditate and try and talk to them, or at least figure out what is missing, and ask them if they need to move on, if you can help move them on, depending on what their function is. Like in Irish folklore, they've got the brownies and the leprechauns. They have specific functions based upon the culture. If it's Italian, look at the culture and see what they need or what is there to make them happy.
I found that feeding them usually helps. But
like
speaking to them,
you said about the elementals, there end up being reflections of people there that takes on that thing. Same thing with house spirits. And they take on the context of the people that were there. The thing is, the people that are there now may have to deal with the fact that there's some sort of cultural idiom dealing with a spirit that is an accumulation of the spiritual energies of the place. It becomes a genie loci. And
Right.
like you said, meditate to try to figure out how to deal with it.
Well, I looked up Mazzamorello, and all the hits I got on that were Saint Mary Mozzarella, the founder of the Silesian order. So I don't know what's going on there.
I don't know. A lot of times I'll look at the references for folklore and go back as far as I can to understand the origin stories. And if you understand the origin stories, you can see how it's changed over time, and then try and interpret it. And it goes to, also discernment, listening to your inner voice and saying, okay, does this sound right? Does it not sound right? What may work best for me in dealing with this? And then asking your community. For like my elemental that I had in my basement, I had a group of strong women come in, and it worked for a while to calm things down, but it couldn't, pull off the negativity. It wound up someone who had Appalachian root magic, and I have no clue what that is. It's not my background. So having someone who said, hey, let's try this instead of that.
You talk about testing things and verifying them. I keep thinking about one of the fundamental principles of my own spiritual practice, which is Zen Buddhism. The Buddha said, I believe, in the Sermon on Vulture Mount, do not believe everything I tell you. Verify everything I say against the evidence of your own experience. And I got to take Jen her pills. I've filled her pill boxes, but I haven't brought them in her room yet.
Okay.
Yeah, and we are running at the end of time. I'm going to remind everybody to register. If you please come to the Changing Times, Changing Rules conference, which is going to be taking place on November 8th to 14th, Monday through Friday in the evenings, and Saturday and Sunday all day long. And next week on Otherworldly, we've got Starwolf coming back with more on crystals. He hasn't told me which kind of crystals he's going to be doing yet, but he usually, there's so many, he usually picks one kind and goes into it. Thank you very much, GriffinMmagik, for coming. This is very cool. I love your combination. I really think of science that is science. This is science that just hasn't been explored because we don't want it to not be true. It's like, why? That's so silly. Why lose this? But thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
We'll see you again in a couple weeks.
True.
Well, yeah, thank you for offering so much to us tonight. That was really, really good. Anybody that provokes me to think about things and gives me questions and helps me integrate what I do with everything else.
Yes.
And that's the whole theme of my participation in these groups and my willingness to sign up for a bunch of panels at Changing Times, Changing Worlds. So thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining, and I had enjoyed this opportunity, and I will see you guys in a couple of weeks then.
Yay. Okay, well, I'm gonna
Thank you.
Thank you. It was very
Yeah.
thorough.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.